Hi everyone, my name is Sanvi. Today we're going to be speaking with Mr. Devansh Kukreja. Mr. Kukreja graduated in 2019 from Carnegie Mellon University, where he double majored in computer science and information systems. During college, he worked at companies such as Skirt, Bloomberg, and Facebook. He was also a technical project lead for Autolab for 3 years. After Autolab, he became a software engineer at Facebook, now known as Meta, and has been in that role for 3 years. So, Mr. Kukreja, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Of course, you're doing great.
Are you ready to get started?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so first of all, what led you to make the decision to major in computer science?
Well, I actually initially I actually thought that I was going to go into design instead.
Okay.
Um, Back when I was seven-ish, I stumbled onto my dad's laptop and he had Photoshop on there, and so I basically spent like 5, 6 years just playing around with Photoshop,
Mhm.
doing tutorials, like trying out different designs and templates and techniques. Ultimately, though, I discovered that the part that I liked about it was less of the artistic side, and more of the technical side of doing a few things or composing different filters and operations together
Mhm.
to make something completely brand new and kind of crazy, like something that you couldn't make by hand from scratch.
Mhm.
So I kind of found that computer science was a way for me to, I guess, like create a lot of things.
Mhm.
Um, it felt like a way to build things that would run on their own and that people could go ahead and use afterwards.
Yeah.
So I really got into it from there. I took an AP Comp Sci class in 10th grade.
Okay.
First time ever programming, actually.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I just kind of latched onto that, started making Android apps and got really into it.
Mhm. So, did you do any other computer science projects during high school?
A few different ones. So I was part of Vex Robotics.
Okay.
And in Vex Robotics, we have competitions that we actually go to and compete at and everything. So I was learning how to program and I wanted to make things that other people would actually like want to use.
Mhm.
So a big part of competitions is finding teams that you want to partner up with.
Okay.
For the first set of matches, you are partnered up with someone random, and then at the very end, you get to pick who you actually want to compete with.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I built was a scouting app where you could go to other teams, you could check out their robots, like see how their autonomous like drive works,
Mhm.
note it all down, and then when it came time to pick partners, you could quickly scan through and pick whoever you wanted to come with you based on what robot your robot would be the most compatible with.
Mhm. Oh, that's
Very
interesting.
fun. It ended up adding like a lot of extra features, like actually like designing robots inside of it,
Okay.
but projects.
Yeah, sounds cool. So, CMU is obviously an amazing university for computer science. So, what made you choose CMU for undergrad, and what were your other options?
Sure. So Carnegie Mellon was a school that I applied to early decision.
Okay,
In that sense, the decision was made the moment I got in, which
right.
was very like it took a lot of stress off, I would say, to have that locked down. I actually mainly joined for the information systems program.
Okay.
I knew that I wanted to go to a school that was small, just like the high schools that I went to growing up. I wanted a school that had a more fundamental and theoretical approach to computer science,
Hmm.
because I found that that would prepare me more to learn everything I wanted to in the future, even beyond college.
Hmm.
And I wanted a school where the students like to collaborate with each other more than compete with each other.
Right.
Um, and that requirement pretty much knocked out Berkeley as an option. Uh, CMU pretty much hit all of my check boxes.
Hmm.
And in addition, my sister went there as well. She had a good time. Um, yeah, and I guess something else interesting there is I actually joined CMU as an information systems major directly.
Okay.
I joined on the IS track. And
Mhm.
then once I was there, I wanted more technical background. That's when I picked up all the classes from computer science and got the double major.
Got it. So, do you think ED is a smart option for a lot of students to consider?
Definitely. Every student should at least ED to one university that
Okay.
they want to go to. And they should definitely early action to all the universities they feel ready to apply to, with the quicker timeline.
Right.
It just gives you a smaller pool of people to compete with, and that's always worth it.
Mhm. So at CMU, what activities were you involved in, and how was your experience there?
Overall, it's pretty good. I I did a lot of hackathons. I guess that's not technically at CMU because we take a bus somewhere else, so like Penn Apps or something similar.
Mhm.
But I did a lot of hackathons. I mentored a few hackathons, and then I also joined a dance team.
Mhm.
We're actually met one of my closest friends now. So it was absolutely worth it. I do think that there is a flip side to CMU as well, though, where because the classes are so difficult, especially in computer science, I think some of the professors compete with each other to make harder and harder classes.
Oh,
That leads to a little bit of a stress culture,
okay.
where everyone is always has more work than they think they can handle, and so they're a little stressed out trying to get everything done and finish and get through it.
Mhm.
For me, that's actually what I wanted. Um, the school had a very like nerdy atmosphere and nerdy culture, and I wanted to just immerse myself in computer science
Mhm.
in all directions. But that's definitely not for everyone.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So during college, you did internships at Bloomberg and Facebook, or Meta now, which are huge companies. So please tell us about those internships. How were you able to get them and how have they helped you today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we can start with the Bloomberg internship. This one spun off from a hackathon, actually.
Okay.
I was at I think YHacks. I think it was a hackathon at Yale University.
Mhm.
And my team and I were just working on stuff, and I was traveling around to different spots to just work on my laptop. And I was sitting in this one auditorium, and this guy just comes up to me and is like, "Oh, what are you designing?" And I tell him about it. And we start talking, and eventually he mentions that he works at Bloomberg and that I should give him like find him when they come to our career fair.
Mhm.
So fast forward a few months, and Carnegie Mellon has their usual career fair for people to find internships and jobs.
Mhm.
I find this guy, I go up to the front, so I get an interview, and then I just go through and pass it from there.
Mhm.
Bloomberg is definitely a very, very good company to work for, I think.
Mhm.
They're very philanthropic, especially in New York. Like they donate to every museum you can think of. They support a lot of great nonprofit causes.
Mhm.
Um, it's a very, very good first experience to have. And then for the Facebook, right? I guess the Meta internship. There was a little bit of a hack here. So the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon, every year they have a semi-secret job fair,
Okay.
which is smaller than the main job fair for the entire university, but it's specific for SCS students in software engineering jobs.
Mhm.
At this point, I had taken a few CS courses, but I wasn't exactly in the School of Computer Science officially yet. But a lot of my friends were, so I showed up. I got a name tag. I wrote my name on it, and I walked in. I just interviewed with them. And ultimately, once you get to the interview stage, it doesn't matter how you got there.
Right.
Once you're there, that's enough.
Mhm. So what kind of skills did you learn at these internships? What kind of projects did you work on?
Yeah, I would say the Bloomberg one I think was a little bit less interesting in terms of work.
Okay.
Um, my team worked on some pretty interesting stuff. The way that so my team was one of the front ends, one of the first points of contact for stock price updates
Mhm.
coming into the Bloomberg system. They were a team called Ticker Plants, and they handled ticks that were coming in, and a tick is a new stock price that's being reported by a stock exchange.
Okay.
And so my team's job was to bring all of these, basically collect all of these new stock prices and then put them in a format that the rest of the company could consume
Mm.
inside of the Bloomberg terminal, so they could show it to investors who want to know what the current stock price is for different things.
Okay.
Um, the team was pretty interesting, but my work on it as an intern was basically using a drag and drop UI, adding a little bit of custom code
Mhm.
to make some new interfaces to track the history of some changes that we made to some configs.
Got it.
Uh,
At Facebook, what kind of work did you do?
yeah, at Facebook, that was pretty fascinating actually. Facebook has this philosophy that everyone should be able to push code as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And so if anyone pushes bad code, then it's not their fault, it's the system's fault for allowing them to push bad code.
Okay.
And because they've had that for a while, they have very good systems to stop people from pushing bad code to production,
Mhm.
which means they can trust interns to actually push things out. So during my summer at Facebook, I worked on the mobile ads manager app. This was an application developed entirely in React Native with some native code as well for iOS and Android.
Okay.
Um, and I was essentially building a system to give people coupons for ads and allow them to redeem them and use them to actually make ads for themselves.
Okay.
It was a good amount of full stack work. So a lot of React Native for the front end, a lot of PHP and Hack for the backend, and then a little bit of database work to log all the information about coupons.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I think I learned one of the coolest systems I've ever discovered, which is Facebook's A/B experimentation framework.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, whenever they have a feature that they want to test. For instance, seeing your friends' photos in a grid versus in a list.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for people to intuitively know which one is actually going to be better, especially at scale. So Facebook has this experimentation system where you define what your group is going to be. You specify some percentage of them to get treatment A and some percentage to get treatment B. That would be some people seeing the grid and some people seeing the list.
Mm-hmm.
And then you launch the experiment, which means depending on which group a person is in, they see one of the two options.
Mm-hmm.
And then Facebook can track the metrics they care about. For instance, how much are they looking at ads or how long are they spending on the app, to figure out which one is actually better and which one people actually like more.
Oh, okay. That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, one of the coolest systems I've seen. And I think a lot of companies that I've like talked to in Bennett before didn't use such a data-driven approach to
Mm-hmm.
software engineering. It's more commonplace now than it was back then.
Got it.
So just the first experience of that.
Yeah, sounds exciting. So, aside from your internships at Bloomberg and Facebook, you also worked at Autolab as a project lead for 3 years. So, what is Autolab and what was your role there?
Excellent question. Autolab is an open source project that I worked on back at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
It's an auto grading platform for computer science classes. And so when I took AP Computer Science, when we had coding homework that we had to turn in, then we would all get our laptops, we'd stand in a line, and the teacher would look at it, skim through the code, and then check it off and give us the points for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it feels very archaic now, and it felt archaic back then too.
Yeah.
And so Autolab is what's supposed to solve that. It was a project developed by a professor at CMU. His name is David O'Halloran. He wrote some pretty commonplace books for system design.
Mm-hmm.
And so he got a team together. I joined this team after they'd built the first version, initially just as a full stack engineer. And then by junior year, I started leading the team to develop new features and new like code editing systems that we added as well.
Got it. So,
It was really good, I think, because it was a very small group.
okay.
So a lot of opportunities to actually do like coding work and get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was such a small group that was leading such a big project, we got to work on some very eclectic, got a very eclectic range of experiences
Well,
in
that's good.
coding.
How
Every
widespread did the program become?
Pretty large. Back when I was on the team, the majority of CS classes at CMU were using them.
Oh,
And we'd onboarded other universities as well, including one that was in China.
oh,
Um, so surprisingly broad.
wow. Yeah. So now you've been a software engineer at Meta or Facebook for the past 3 years. How are you liking your job?
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is attributed to the team that I'm on right now.
Mhm.
I think in any big software company, especially at big companies, the culture and the work is highly dependent on what team you end up working with.
Mhm.
So my current team is a research team. I'm part of Facebook's AI research org,
Okay.
and we work on first-person computer vision research.
Mhm.
So in a world, sometime in the future, it will come about where everyone has glasses that have cameras on them. We want to develop the tech that allows software to understand what the person is seeing.
Okay.
Should understand the past of what's happened. It should understand the present of what's currently going on, and it should also be able to forecast the future of what the person is going to do next.
Oh, interesting.
And so one example of that would be if you have these glasses on, then you should be able to ask a question like, where did I leave my keys? or did I turn the stove off before I left the house?
Mm.
All of that should be automatically like logged in some format that you can search through it later on, basically giving everyone superhuman memory.
Wow, sounds useful. So,
Yeah.
as a part of your research team, what are your daily responsibilities?
Yeah. So as I'm mainly a software engineer on a team that is doing machine learning and AI research,
Mhm.
my work is still very eclectic, I guess similar to Autolab in that sense,
Mhm.
where my last project was full stack. It was using React as a front end. It was using Flask as a back end. And it involved a lot of user studies with researchers who would actually use the tool that I was building.
Mhm.
I've also done some video infra work recently. So because the data set that we're building is completely based in videos, like very, very long 7-hour videos,
Mhm.
there's a lot of inference code that goes behind splicing them up so humans can label them, like adding a bounding box around an object that's tracked.
Okay.
There's a lot of info that goes behind compressing the videos, slicing them up, and then piecing them back together when we actually want to release them to researchers for them to use.
Got it.
Um, so day to day, I chat with my team, which is again a pretty small team. It's me and two other people.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
we work with the larger group of researchers and PhDs and postdocs at other universities as well that we're collaborating with. And my team basically figures out what we can do that will have the most impact in pushing the state of the art forward in this
Right.
space.
Yeah.
We try to see what the obstacles and choke points are for researchers. And right now it's mainly scale. Nobody knows how to train on a data set this large.
Mhm.
And we also look at ways that we can get new researchers into the pipeline to use the data set that we're building.
Right.
And that side mainly involves making the data set easier to explore and
Mhm.
use. And also make tutorials and videos that people can jump into and very quickly try out the data set with.
So the technology that you were talking about with the cameras and the glasses, like, is there a timeline on that of when that software is going to be done?
Well, depends on how good of a job we do. There are a lot of components to it. We have the hardware side, where you need glasses that have enough sensors to
Mhm.
understand the world around them, but you also need a good enough display that can actually use augmented reality to show the user things that they want to see.
Mhm.
Then there's the software side of using machine understanding or computer vision to understand what's going on, as well as the side of even figuring out how to use a transparent display to actually augment the reality of the world around you.
Mhm.
I mean, there's research on things like taking a daytime scene and then strictly by adding light, making it look like it's at night, using quirks of like physiology and psychology.
Wow.
So our part of that is really just a small part of all the obstacles that we need to get through to actually push this out.
Definitely, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Hmm. So outside of Facebook and all the cool technology that you're building, are there any other apps or projects that you have developed on your own?
Yeah, a lot of side projects. I think every programmer tends to have multiple passion projects
Mhm.
that we make a lot of progress on, never finish, and then just hop on to the next exciting thing.
Right. What was your most
Um,
recent one?
Most recently, I guess I'm working on a few of them right now. Um, One of them is an online card game. It's a version of this game called Kaloki. It's a game that my grandparents taught me, and I play it with them all the time whenever I'm in Seattle. But I would love to play it with them when I'm remote.
Okay.
And there are a few like semi-okay versions of Kaloki online,
Mhm.
but nothing with the very specific rule set that we play with.
Okay.
So I'm working on my own so I can play with them.
Oh, sounds nice.
Yeah,
There's some
and
of the
then
other ones.
yeah, it's a very fun project. And then the second one is I like to take time lapses.
Okay.
It's surprisingly easy to take them with your phone at this point.
Mhm.
But when I go to edit them, a big part of that is speeding up and slowing down the time lapse. So the parts where nothing is really changing go by faster. And the parts which are dramatic, like going like sunset time, a
Mhm.
lot of changes are happening and you don't want to speed through that. But most of the day, the light is pretty similar shining down from the sun.
Yeah.
So another thing I'm working on the side is something to automatically look at the difference between frames in a video and automatically speed up and speed down parts of it so you get like a consistently interesting video end to end.
Oh, it sounds so interesting. Oh my God. Yeah. That's a good one. Okay. Well, for the last question, what advice would you give to high schoolers wanting to get into computer science or large companies like Meta?
Yeah. Well, for computer science first, I would say just go for it. There are pretty much no obstacles to anyone getting into computer science these days.
Mhm.
There are plenty of tutorials online. There are plenty of resources to just jump into and learn. And even when I was in college, a lot of times we would go to YouTube to just find examples of people teaching algorithms that we're trying to learn in our classes.
Mhm.
Um, I would say the best way to learn computer science outside of a class is actually to go to a college's website, like Carnegie Mellon,
Mhm.
look at the syllabus, and usually they have all the previous years of the class like fully up, and just start working your way through the homework that they have, or the lecture notes that they have, and that's a very easy way to get started. I think another part of it is you really only learn computer science and programming by applying it.
Mhm.
So side projects are a really great way to do that. And I think the most important thing there is to pick something that you yourself are going to use, because then you'll be the most invested in making it good and you'll understand what you actually need to do to make it useful as well.
Got it. And what about for students looking to apply to college right now?
Yeah, for college, I think it depends on what program and university you want to go to. Information systems, I think, is a program that not many people actually know about.
Mhm.
It's a major that's dedicated to making apps. I think of it as the startup major. They teach you how to come up with like a product, come up with user fit, and then also prototype and build that out. Um, and that's an extremely useful skill to have if you ever want to start your own company.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and for universities that are more theoretical, like Carnegie Mellon, if people are interested in that in the fundamentals directly, they care a lot more about mathematical background than they do about computer science and programming background.
Got it.
They would rather see someone who competes in math competitions and is really good at them than people who are competing in programming competitions.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Is that just because math applies to a lot more majors or?
It's because knowing the math and knowing the fundamentals can make people very, very good computer scientists.
Got it.
A lot of what Carnegie Mellon teaches in computer science is how to write proofs. So how to logically prove that your code is going to be correct and work in every possible case.
Mhm.
And also thinking about like higher dimensional spaces like complexity trees and so on. Things like that are actually a lot easier if you have more of a mathematical background than if you have a programming background coming in.
Got it.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
that's it. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Do you have any other thoughts to share?
Yeah, I think one more. Uh, there's there's something that I think would help a lot of people who want to get into big tech companies.
Okay.
And I think this is something that you only really figure out once you start like seriously applying and like searching for them and trying to make your way in.
Mhm.
Uh, but there's a very efficient process to actually get into big tech these days. Step one is really going onto a website called LeetCode, which teaches you the algorithms that you need and gives you practice questions so you can ace any interview that you come across,
Okay.
the technical side.
Mhm.
And then the second part is that it's actually not too difficult to get referrals at big tech companies.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that's definitely worth it. I mean, before ever applying to a big tech company, you should at least reach out to your network, see who else works there, and see if anyone would be willing to give you a referral to get in.
Hmm. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Your advice was really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.